Hello, everyone, and welcome to Immigration Talk Show. I'm your host, and I'm going to be with you for this next hour, this session, which is lined up for you, a very interesting one and a topic which you would love. So stay with us. And before we head on with the discussion of the day and also have our guests join us, I have this very important disclaimer. And that is by watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. Use of information is at your own risk. So, friends, I hope that you've kept that in mind and welcome once again to Immigration Talk Show. And today's lined up discussion is going to be a very interesting one. The topic of discussion is, can H1B visa holders be detained? And we're going to try to understand the immigration policies and also the risks involved. But yes, there is increasing immigration enforcement, evolving policies, high scrutiny, and so much happening, right? Especially with this new administration coming into the picture. Well, we also have many H1B visa holders and employers who are very concerned about the potential risks, and especially when it comes to compliance, legal pitfalls, and even detention for that matter. So, today we're going to discuss with none other than this very distinguished guest who's going to join us today. And she's none other than Isadora Velasquez. Yes, please help me welcome her. Hi, Isa. How are you doing today?
Join you. Well, very happy to join you. I'm doing very well today, and I'm sorry we have to discuss this topic, but I think it's really relevant, as you mentioned in the introduction. There are detentions going on today. It is a bit of a promise that we had from the administration that took over. So it's good to know our rights and what we can do to protect ourselves and whether we can run the risk of detention under this current precedent that we have. So I'll let any of you ask me questions, including, of course, of you, Nipasa. So take it away.
Thank you so much. And folks out there, we have attorney Isadora, who has dedicated over 15 years to immigration law, fighting for individuals and families, in a wide range of cases. So please feel free to join us with your questions. And yes, we also have a phone number actually where you can call to ask the questions yourself and maybe even get onto a short discussion. And the number is 425-436-6335, and the access code is 988-888. So, yes, Isa, like you said, this is a very timely topic, and it's crazy because it's not like earlier, when you talk about H1B this year. And there have been changes, of course, since fiscal year 2025, we saw that. And now the fee hike. And so many things are, governing what is happening to H1B right now. So, where should we start? What can people out there expect from today's discussion?
Okay, so when it comes to detention, I want to point out that it's not that the law itself has changed. Nothing has actually changed when it comes to detention. The elements, the requirements to detain anyone in the United States are the same. What has changed is the intensity in which these detentions are occurring. During the campaign, we heard a lot from the Trump or current president about conducting mass deportations. In order to get to the level promised, detentions had to occur. What we've noticed in the first 100 days of this presidency is a large volume of detentions. Most of them have not led to the deportations promised because there are due process and steps that need to be taken for these deportations to occur. People have rights and can present your case before a judge. But we have noticed that many cases that normally wouldn't lead to a detention, that would normally lead to a case maybe let go or just overlooked, are now being processed in detention. So that's why I appreciate having the opportunity to explain when a case, particularly an H1B visa, could be subject to detention, so that we know it's not a change in the law. It's just something that we need to be on the lookout. Obviously, the most common way is we need to understand that a visa can be revoked in all candor for any reason. The US, the same way they issue the visas, they have the authority to revoke said visas. The most common way to revoke a visa is when we are accused of a crime. This is an important distinction because we don't necessarily need to be actually convicted of a crime. The simple accusation is enough. And this is also important because the government recently passed significant law, a new law called the Laken Riley Act, that also encourages the government to actually seek forward detention of anyone accused of certain crimes, particularly violent crimes or crimes of theft. So keep that in mind, that if you are accused of a crime, of course, that will lead to the revocation of your visa, but it would definitely lead to your detention, but based on this new law. If you're coming into the airport, that is typically the most common way for H1B holders to be detained, because that's typically the most common way in which they tend to find out whether or not their visa has been revoked. Based on past experiences, the Muslim ban was very controversial back during the prior Trump administration. And it was a very controversial way in which people found out their visas being revoked. And it actually led not so much to detentions, but to people not being allowed into the US, even when they had a valid H1B visa. So far, we haven't received any announcements of any potential bans. We have received potential travel bans for particular countries such as Cuba and Haiti. They have yet to go into effect, and we don't know if they will affect visas such as the H1B visa already issued. We will keep you informed if that were to happen. But revocation of visas, to answer the broad question, would be the main way that H1B holders would be detained if they're already in the US. And now, if they're coming into the US and they seek to come in, they could be detained seeking to come in, if they're either to be returned or to simply not allowed into the country.
And when you talk about the Muslim ban, I'm sure you know there are folks already in the United States from maybe few from those countries. What's going to happen to them?
Well, the Muslim ban, although it was upheld by the Supreme Court, what was interesting about that particular section is that it only affected individuals who were already out. So if you were in the US when the Muslim ban went into effect back then in the prior Trump administration, it didn't revoke your visa in the US. It simply meant that when you were trying to come in, you were not allowed into the country. It did force many attorneys like myself back then to make sure that the visa that you had, that the status that you had was being enforced, because there's a difference between seeking admission. When you're coming into the airport, you're seeking admission, and that's where people found that their valid visas were not eligible to come into the US. But for people who were already in the Muslim ban, they were already admitted, they already had a valid I-94. And although their visas may have been revoked based on the Muslim ban, meaning they couldn't no longer travel, their I-94, which is the document we received letting us know how long we could stay in the US, allowed the individuals to stay in the country for the amount of time allowed. So for the individuals who are already here from the countries listed in the Muslim ban, they're okay as long as their I-94 allows it.
That is very interesting. And I think at this moment, we should just not travel, stay in the United States. And what do you say, Isa?
Yes, I would recommend. I know it sounds sad and extreme, but I agree with you, Nipa. I think if you have your I-94 and it has a set amount of time, very important. I encourage anyone watching, check your I-94. If you don't know where to have it, you lost it, you've never had it, I maybe we should put it on the chat. There's a website where you can find the status of your I-94. And once again, this document is the one that tells you how long you're allowed to stay in the US, and take advantage of it. It will tell you when you're supposed to leave. And as Nipa said, don't travel unless you have to. I know it sounds sad. We want to visit our friends and family, but now is not the time. Things are interesting. There are many changes happening. We wake up every day to a new executive order. Until things settle down and we know exactly what's going on with immigration, let's stay still and not travel for a while.
Yes, good one. Thank you, Isa. And with that said, and what you were just speaking earlier, do you have any cases or examples of recent cases this year, where H1B visa holders were actually stopped and at the airport? and even detained for that matter, and what could be the main reasons?
Yes, and I'm actually going to go and take advantage to answer your question and go ahead and answer Vika's question. So Vika's asked about he's been or she has been on an H1B for 3 years and heard about somebody getting detained at the airport after returning from India. Why would this happen? That has actually been a case that I have dealt with recently. People returning with H1B. Why would it happen? And that's why I gave the example of my clients being accused of crimes, returning on an H1B and getting detained at the airport, and at the airport finding out that the simple accusation, what we may sometimes may call an arrest warrant, was enough to have that visa revoked. So it's very important that we keep track of our visa the same way I mentioned before, keeping track of our H1B. We need to understand that the US, when it comes to visas, and this is not just for H1B, it can apply to a student visa, it can apply to all visas. They can be revoked unilaterally by the United States government. So if a visa is revoked, you could be detained coming from any country at the airport because you are seeking admission. Now, when you're detained at the airport, one of two things could happen. The government can ask you to withdraw your admission, which would mean that you're simply choosing to go back, or you can state the reasons. You can try to fight your admission. Understand that if it is that your visa is revoked, they have to state the reasons, but they also can, coming into the US is the analogy of coming into the club. If I don't like your outfit, I can tell you no sneakers allowed, and I'm not going to let you in, and I'm not going to let you in. The only people who are allowed into the club all the time, no matter what, would be US citizens. Not even residents have the privilege of going into the VIP room all the time. So because of that reason, keep in mind that even if you want to fight for your right to get in, you might not have the right to do so. The only way to fight all the way to get in is if you're seeking asylum. So the only way to actually push for your entry would be to seek asylum, argue that you are afraid to go back home, have a credible fear interview. Be very cautious with this, as it would close your door to go back home. Personally, I would not encourage anyone to seek asylum, to have what they call the credible fear interview, unless it is absolutely necessary. Coming into the US seeking asylum solely to continue working, I do not believe it's the best choice if in case a visa has been revoked and for any reason they're not letting you in. The,
Well, yeah.
the question continues to worst case scenario, if you get detained, how long could you be held in the process to get released? And I kind of hinted as to the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is when they're not giving you a chance to explain, when you haven't been allowed visas at the airport in particularly. It's not a place where you can appeal a decision. Once a visa is revoked, there's not an appeal process. It's not when a visa is denied at the embassy where you can apply again. It is revoked at the airport. There's not an appeal process. You could be detained up to 24 hours until they send you back. So the worst case scenario would be just that you have no other choice but to seek a credible fear interview in order to come to the US. Understand that, for example, if your visa were to be revoked, as one extreme example, because they think your employer is not real, or because if they're a student and they think you're not studying full time, or the example I gave because of any criminal history, you don't
Mhm.
have the right to appeal the particular circumstances of the revocation of your visa at the airport. You can only fight to come to the US to seek asylum. So that's worst case scenario. You can only either go back home or seek asylum to come to the US. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
I know it doesn't sound really pretty, but also when you talk about, crime, I mean, for a person under H1B, crime, whether you're talking about the home country or in the US or both ways, it's still
Both,
a crime.
both. Keep that in mind as well. Sometimes it's a very interesting question because we are asked, have you committed a crime? And we tend to respond, where? I understand that when US asks the question, it means anywhere. And technically, they do have access to all the records anywhere. So we may think, oh, but I have never committed a crime in the United States. But what about that DUI or that minor marijuana charge that I have back in Canada? Well, the US may be aware of it, and maybe it was legal over there, but it's not legal here in the United States. We need to be very conscious of that. And sadly, these are minor things that they can use against us. And again, these are minor things that you can fight and appeal to reapply for your visa, but there might not be things that you can fight and appeal to enter the US in case you're stopped. And there might not be things that you can fight or appeal if you're in the US and you are detained to seek your deportation. And we need to make that distinction. There's a big difference if you're detained coming into the US at the airport, in which your only choice would be to, like I said, seek asylum or get kicked out,
Hmm.
or if you're in the US and you have an encounter with ICE officers and you are detained in the US in an encounter with ICE officers and you are detained, you do have certain rights. Only an immigration officer can remove you. I'm sorry, an immigration judge can remove you. If you have been in the US for more than 2 years, and this goes back to the individual who mentioned that they have been in the H1B for 3 years, if you have an encounter with ICE and you are detained not at the airport, but in the US, you have the right to appear before a judge, even if your visa is revoked. And there you may have the right to fight for why your visa may be revoked. So that's the big difference between at the airport, where your rights are very limited. You may only have the right to go back home or to fight for asylum, while in the US, where you can fight for why is your visa being revoked. Is it because they're alleging that your job is not real? Is it they're alleging you're not really a student? You can fight for it if you are detained in the US, while it's different if you are detained at the airport.
Okay. Thank you, Isa, for taking that up. And it relates me to this question from Chandra asking, if I get arrested for something minor while on H1B, does that automatically put me at risk of detention?
Yes, because and I'm sorry to answer so quickly and so adamantly, but yes, because technically the Department of State can automatically revoke your H1B. We see that this used to seldomly happen. If it was something minor, shoplifting, smoking a joint, we noticed that H1B wouldn't be affected by it. But lately, or in certain administrations, H1Bs could be affected by a minor DUI. So keep that in mind. Because the H1B could be affected by minor crimes, any visa could be revoked by minor crimes, leaving you without status. Yes, you could be detained by being without status. If a visa is revoked, you lose your I-94 status. The argument here would be that you remain legal until your I-94 expires, which is why I encourage everyone to keep checking your I-94 regularly, because the defense for anyone whose visa is revoked while in the US is that you're still allowed in the US for the time allowed when you came in on your I-94, which once again is a document you that allows you to stay in the US for the time mentioned in it.
Mhm, mhm. Right. And, before we really started this program, we were talking about scrutiny, social media. So, of course, there has been a lot of changes, especially with the new administration coming into the picture. It's President Trump now. And how has these, latest immigration policies changed things for H1B visa holders? You're saying that there's not real change in law, but there are changes happening and it's governing. Even it's affecting H1B visa holders for sure. So, are they facing more scrutiny now?
Correct. You will notice that your applications will get a lot longer. They will include a lot more information that are already there, but in greater detail about your social media. You may notice the lines at the airport also getting a little bit longer, maybe because of shorter staff, but also because this already started before, but now it has been announced that it will be done with greater scrutiny, as Nipa mentioned. The going through your phone, the checking your social media, and by the way, this is also going to be done allegedly to U.S. citizens, and it's not just with this administration. It was announced with the prior administration as well. But it has been emphasized that for all visas, not just H1Bs, there will be greater scrutiny placed on social media. And now, once again, your phone, your WhatsApp messages. I personally encourage my clients, all of them, to delete social media when you're coming in through the airport. Then again, I must confess, officers do ask you. They find it rather suspicious that you don't have TikTok or WhatsApp or Instagram on your phone, especially depending on our age when we show up. So they will ask you about it. So just be ready to answer. Maybe you're a very healthy individual who has no need for social media. If you're an individual working on tech, it might be kind of interesting if you don't have any of it on your phone. So just be ready to explain it, because yes, there will be a lot more scrutiny on it, and we do expect the visa applications and renewals to include many more questions and to get a lot longer. They keep growing every year, and they might be getting longer. If we have any repetition of the 4 years before that we had with prior President Trump, we know that a lot of money was spent investigating people, and this is probably going to be another year, another 4 years of more investigations, just to make sure that when visas are approved, your background check is very clean.
So true, so true. And I think we would just have to say goodbye to side businesses, whether it's even selling a small thing or making a small amount of dollars. But I think, yes, high scrutiny is just going to be there, not just now or just for the next month, but I think it's going to prevail for the whole of Trump's 2.0. So let's get ready for all of that.
Yes.
And yeah. So also, Isa, if you could also tell me about the the talk about fairness for high skilled immigrants act. There has been this talk, and could this really help H1B visa holders feel more secure, or does it not really affect detention risks?
It depends who you ask, because the focus of the act has been more on the caps, and but the caps on country conditions, on certain countries, and saying that some countries, particularly India, would be more delayed because there are certain visas issued per country. That this is the most you can get. That has been the focus, to make it fair for everyone. No caps. We're just going to apply blindly for everyone. Some people say that's not fair, because for example, the visa lottery, which is a separate visa, is based on people who can't come to the U.S. On other visas, and they apply to the visa lottery because there's not enough diversity of certain countries inside the US. So that's the balancing. There's a lot of debate on it. Personally, the President Trump recently issued an address to Congress, in which one of his few remarks on immigration said that the government didn't need immigration reform. It just needed a new president, and he was it. So I do not believe that this act will actually be approved, at least this year, for or in the near future, as long as Mr. Trump is president. I do think that if it is tweaked in certain areas, it would be beneficial, but the focus so far has been on the caps for visas, not really on ensuring that protections such as not revoking visas unilaterally are taken seriously. I do hope language is included, because I do think revoking without letting the person know it's not fair. But so far, that has not been the main focus of the government.
I know it's all surprising whether you talk about raids, you talk about anything that the Trump administration is doing just to catch hold and let you off the country.
Yeah.
So that is there. And also, I'd just like to say hi, once again to Chandra, Vikas, and folks out there who have joined us with your questions. Please don't forget to like, share, and also subscribe to our channel if you haven't as yet already. It is Immigration Talk Show on YouTube, and you can also check us out on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and also on X. I mean, it's just because we were talking about social media. I remembered that I have to do this too. So connect with us and stay connected, friends. And yeah, we have Ayush. I also was reading this news yesterday. So DHS has really introduced this new app where migrants can share their intention to self-deport. So if I
Yeah.
do so, will this ban me from coming to the US forever?
Okay, so let me explain. If for individuals, if you leave the U.S. and you have been in the United States without status, or you enter the country illegally to the border, or you've been in the U.S. for more than 180 days without status, you may think you're leaving and everything's okay, but in reality, you are deporting yourself, and which is really important. So this app, I actually think, is helpful for people who have been in the U.S. for less than 180 days without status, meaning your H1B expired, you didn't renew it, and you've been in the US for less than 6 months without status and you want to leave, it would be helpful to put it in the app, because that way the US will know, okay, you left, and there wouldn't be actual any negative consequences to you, because you didn't accumulate enough time illegally in the US to have these negative consequences. However, if you were in the US illegally for more than 6 months, the app doesn't really clarify if there will be consequences or not. It will simply say that you will be letting them know that you left. You will be helping the government because they won't have to look for you to deport you. But it doesn't really clarify. It says that maybe later on you could apply for the visa, but the government hasn't really guaranteed that it won't have any negative effect. So what I've been telling my clients is to use it only if they are sure 100%. I know I'm going to leave. There's no way I'm going to stay. I'm leaving. I want to let the government know. Then yes, go ahead and use it. Might as well do it because you're leaving. You want to let the government know. But don't use it expecting that by doing so or by reporting yourself, you're going to be able to later apply for a visa and come in without problems. Reality is that if you stayed in the US illegally for more than 6 months, you
Mhm.
cannot return for 3 years. And if you stayed illegally for over a year, you cannot return for 10 years. And you must apply for a new visa. And it may be that even after the 10 years, you might not be allowed back. So the app is a bit tricky. I think it's lacking some language that clarifies. But if you know you're leaving and you really want to go, might as well report. But don't assume that simply by reporting, you will be okay. There's another important app that I think you guys should know about, and it applies for anyone who comes in. Interestingly, for H1B in particularly, it wouldn't apply immediately. It applies mainly to tourists. Canadians, for example, are very upset over it. And the government has always requested that all immigrants keep the government informed when they're here for more than 30 days.
Mhm.
This is an auto a report app, I guess you could call it, or a system, or now all immigrants must report to the government. It's mandatory. It has always been mandatory, but now there's a specific website that we must use. I mentioned Canadians because they have always been allowed into the US without visas for up to 6 months, and now they're being forced to report, which they're not big fans of. But
Mhm.
it has specific exceptions. For example, asylum seekers don't have to report. H1Bs, because you report at the airport, technically don't have to report. But it's important to be on the lookout because the government keeps changing who has to report, who doesn't have to report. I wouldn't want any of you to have to report and miss it and then have your visa revoked over a simple technicality. So keep on the lookout to these executive orders and memorandums that come out, maybe in case you have to put your information in another website, something simple that you may have to do depending on what the news say tomorrow.
Just like an attendance register or maybe like a biometric system. So different ways, but you still have to sign and let the authority know that you're in the country. So treat it like that. And it's always best to do your research properly and play safe. So I'd always say, if you are confused about anything, or just like Ayush has asked about this new app, I mean, consider consulting with an attorney or an expert who knows all these things at the tip of their hands, and they will guide you in the best possible way. So why not also you can choose to consult with attorney Isadora, and you can do so by calling her on her number as well. Her number is 305-938-0676. And you can also email attorney Isadora at isalawyers.com, and go visit www.isalawyers.com. So thank you for that. And thank you, Isa, for telling us about this other app as well. So,
By the
so
way,
much
the
out
app is
there, right? Yeah.
called CVP Home. It used to be CVP1. Now it's called
Yeah.
CVP Home. It's not just a self-deport. You can also use it if you're coming to the US, maybe through the border, and you want to get your I-94 ahead of time to make it faster. You can get it up to 7 days before, and it will make your process easier. So it has other tools besides just self-deporting. Just check it out.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That was really a good one. And also, we have Neha who's joined in with a question. We'll quickly take that. So, Neha is asking, are there specific warning signs that an H1B visa holder might be at risk of detention? And what should we watch out for? Interesting.
Well, I recommend all my clients, and this is not just in the Trump administration, all my visa holders, when they travel, I always recommend before they come back, check your emails. The Department of State typically announces any revocations and if they have any issues with your visas via email. Check your status of your visa online prior to coming in, just in case. I do so as the attorney, but just in case, you can be proactive and do so yourself. check your I-94 prior to leaving, the one that you had prior to leaving the country, if you had one. So it's good to know that you never overstayed. Just in case you're asked, when was the last time you were in the US? How long did you stay? You will feel comfortable answering those questions. Those tend to be the triggers that may lead to an uncomfortable detention. You stayed more than you had to. Your visa was revoked, you didn't know. You did something or committed a crime or were accused of a crime you didn't know. Sometimes we leave and there's an arrest after the fact, something we didn't know. Somebody with a similar name to us gets in trouble and we are accused. So it's just good to check what we can check. When we're traveling, it's also good to have that conversation. All my clients always have my card. The airport is very tricky because it is, well, I call it no man's land, the same way before I compared it to a club and they have discretion to allow you in or out. You don't have the right to an attorney like we see on TV. You have the right to no, that doesn't apply at the airport. So when you want say you want to call your lawyer, you don't, that doesn't really apply. But if you have somebody's card, which is why I always tell my clients travel with my card, they can call me even if it's at 5 a.m. You can call the attorney, and they tend to have the courtesy. Customs and Border Patrol officers tend to have the courtesy, so that would be a good idea to have with you, the attorney's card or at least somebody's card. For example, your employer. If you're comfortable with your employer and you think there might be any issue with your job, it's good to have your employer's card. If they don't know where you work, it's a new place of business, it's good to have your employer's information. Those are warning signs, as you had asked, that you can have with you. Show this is where I work, it's a new place of business. You may not be able to Google it because it's brand new, or because understand Customs and Border Patrol, they're not immigration attorneys and they're not even embassy officers. They're not as sophisticated as we may want them to be, so we can educate them. So anything you can bring with you, as annoying as it may be, to make their life easier, to show how good you are, and that's why you got your H1B, bring it with you, even if your bag is a little bit, your carry-on is a little bit heavier than you would have liked. That would be my advice.
That's a good one. And thank you so much, Isa, for taking that up. And Neha has another question to follow. So, is there any bifurcated data available of people who are detained or are at risk of being detained?
So let me see if I understand your question. You mean like know your rights, or um,
I think she means like where can she see how many people are detained? Is there a website or somewhere where they can check out the numbers of
yeah.
people who are detained or who are at risk of being detained?
So ICE, ice.gov, ICE baby, yeah, like ICE, the ICE. GOV will give you the number of detentions, and it will also give you the number of deportations. And you'll see there's a big discrepancy. And it should have it. But until recently, they were very criticized, the numbers, because they're big. There's a big difference. The reason there's a big difference is because, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's rather easy to detain somebody. You may detain somebody because when a visa is revoked, they're out of status, or they're accused of a crime, but it's something different to deport someone. It's easy to do at the airport, to deport someone because they're seeking admission. So you can tell them, no, I'm not letting you in, and that's different. But when you're already in the US, for people who have been here over 2 years, you can't send them away. They have the right to appear before a judge. And that's where the Trump administration has face a lot of difficulty. They've noticed a lot of increased detentions, and it's been very difficult in detention centers. So you guys know there's overcrowding in many detention centers. That's why they're using other facilities, like even Guantanamo. But there's not a lot of deportations actually happening because people know their rights. They know they have the right to appear before an immigration judge, and these rights apply to all of you as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And Neha, yes, we've already answered that. That's correct. I would like to see the list of people detained. I hope you can find that. But thank you,
Yeah, you
Neha,
won't be
for
able to see,
joining us.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
you won't be able to see their names, but you will get an idea of how many numbers. And there's a lot
Mhm.
in ice.gov.
Okay. Well, I wonder why does Neha want to see that? I really hope that you are safe and you haven't done anything that you you would like to see or check if you are in the list. But anyway, jokes apart, thank you, Isa, for that. And also, I have another question about this. The rule for visa interview waivers, which recently changed from 48 months to 12 months. So, how might this also impact H1B holders, especially when traveling internationally?
So what we expect is that it's going to be delays. So before, particularly for any renewals, I'm telling all my clients, if you have to renew, don't wait to apply quickly. Don't any renewals, don't wait. And basically, that's the main concern. Renewals are going to take longer because now they're now waiving. And like I said last time, the prior Trump administration cases were going to be taking longer because they're going to take longer. That's what we're expecting. Their waivers being shorter, cases are going to take longer. So expect delays. Expect delays. Expect that your case might take longer. So if you were planning to apply when your case was going to expire on this day, maybe talk to your immigration attorney and see if you could apply earlier. I emphasize see if you could apply because sometimes applying too early might not be the best choice, or you might not be even be allowed to apply that early. But check it out. We do. That's what we expect. That's typically what happens when they take away the waiver and interviews. We notice embassies are also saturated. There have been significant layoffs in the Department of State thanks to the Dutch program. So yeah, things are gonna get slower. Be patient. Be really patient, but don't give up. Keep applying. Keep applying. Just be patient and we expect things to be slower. Apply earlier, sooner, quicker, and be patient.
Yes. Thank you for that, Isa. Great tips, I would say. And I think we should just not expect too much, but also at the same time, not lose hope, but keep trying. So, also, when you talk about H1B, it's all about big tech companies mostly, especially, and they sponsor so many H1B visas also. So, do you think their employees also have been facing more issues at the border this year?
I think it's a balancing act. In a way, I think the involvement of Elon Musk and how vocal he was of H1B and his support during the campaign, I am hoping it will reflect in how H1Bs, particularly in the tech industry, will be processed. At the same time, as Nipa has mentioned regularly, I do think there will be higher scrutiny overall, not just in H1B, in all visas. So I expect higher scrutiny, particularly in startups. We've noticed many questions on companies, whether they're new, whether they're going to succeed, whether they are stable, whether they can afford it. And that's where we expect it's going to get a little bit tougher. But at the same time, like I said, Elon Musk was very vocal in saying that he was here in the US and Tesla is successful because of the H1B program. So that's where we're hoping it will balance out. So be ready to fully understand your company, fully understand your role. So I think interviews are going to get tougher, but at the same time I do hope that either that the numbers will get higher, that will be the effect of Elon Musk. It hasn't been announced yet, but I'm hopeful that that will happen, or that in the alternative that it will be more understanding of how we need the tech, because once again that's how we got Elon into the country. So expect tougher interviews, but at the same time, um, that they said it was good for the economy, so hopefully they'll keep their word in that sense.
Yes, me too. And well, news has it, especially from India, that there has been a very huge drop, when it comes to H1B applications. So I don't know what's going to happen. Will there be enough applicants also registration? What do you say, Isa?
I think with India in particular, the issue has been not so much the tech industry, but the relation between the governments. And if Trump can work better with the Indian government, that hopefully would lead to an increase not only in applicants but also in approvals. That distance between the relationships in the government has also, not only in the H1B area, but it has affected other visas. The lack of reciprocity and treaties between the governments, I mean, in India and the US, has affected severely the applications, and it's something that we need. Once it starts affecting the economy, I hope that Trump will extend the arm until it starts affecting the economy, I think we'll see that this will continue. But I do, there is an employee shortage at the moment. Once the numbers start coming down, we'll see the visas increase. That's my hope as well.
Right, right. I mean, so much is happening, and like you said, every day we wake up to new news, new changes, and new rules coming up. So a lot to grasp right now, and we'll just have to wait for things and all this dust to settle in. I think after that,
Yeah.
we will be able to know.
Yeah, remember, I'm sure I've seen your videos, so I know you guys are very aware that the lottery's coming up. I think also once that lottery happens and we see the numbers, that we'll get new memorandum, which goes back to our prior points as to don't travel, stay still, see what happens. We'll get new memorandums how we see how many people apply, how many people we get in the lottery. It will lead to new decisions that will severely affect the H1B, the scrutiny, how people, how many visas may be affected by revocations. So we have a lot that may be happening in the next couple of weeks. So we have to wait and see.
We will, we will. We have no other option right now but to just be patient and still keep trying. So, all right, then. Well, Isa, Neha says, thanks for the information given. This helps. So, I'm sure. Thank you so much also to Neha, for your questions. Very interesting and all the best. So, Isa, we also have more questions from our Facebook groups, and I would really want, Control to display some of them. And meanwhile, if you could also tell us, because if an H1B visa holder gets detained or denied at entry, what are their legal options? Can they really fight the decision? We already touched on this, but what should be their next step?
Entry is very complicated because in entry you're not giving many options, if any at all. At entry, individuals who are you're called an arriving alien. Horrible name, I hate it. But as an arriving alien, you have very minimal rights. You have the right to either withdraw your admission. If they're not allowing you in, you can withdraw your admission and they'll gladly send you back home. That might be best because sometimes when we withdraw our admission, we're simply sent back home without a deportation order. And we may want that if we want to reapply for your H1B visa or for any visa, tourist visa, student visa. For example, if they were to tell us, we can't find your employer, so we're not going to let you in because we're revoking your H1 visa because we think your employer's fake. That might not be the time to start arguing, oh, it's real. Like I mentioned before, I encourage you to maybe travel with documents already if you know your employer's new or not as easy to find, to show them otherwise so that you can fight it there. But if you have already tried and you haven't had success, the only other remedy, if you can withdraw and you won't be able to fight the case, will be to seek asylum, which would be to request a credible fear interview, which will actually happen or might actually happen at the airport. Or you may get called back to something called deferred inspection, meaning they call you the next day to conduct this credible fear interview. They're incredibly uncomfortable. You have to show that you have suffered past persecution by the government or an agent that the government cannot control in your country. And that's why you cannot go back, because you will suffer future persecution if you go back. By the way, if you show this, then you'll have an asylum claim and you cannot go back home. So personally, I would not recommend it. If your visa is revoked and you know you can fight this, it would be best to simply withdraw your admission, go back home, and try to fix it there. And that way you avoid a deportation order. Sometimes when we fight this and we start saying, no, you're wrong, I can prove to you that my job is real, that I didn't commit that crime, that is not me, and we are fighting it, we end up with what is called an expulsion order. And that is an actual deportation order. And we're not allowed in the US for 5 years. So you could have fixed your visa, maybe applied again for the visa at the embassy, but we can't because now we're deported for 5 years. So knowing that those are the only two choices at the airport, choose wisely unless you're really afraid to go back home and then seek asylum. By the way, warning, arriving aliens do not qualify for bond. So if you are seeking asylum at the airport, you will be detained and placed in jail until your final trial date. So another one of the many reasons why I do not recommend it.
So I like the first option. It sounded better at least.
Yeah. Yes, I always tell I get sadly during this current administration, I must warn you guys that I have been receiving phone calls of people that tell me they can't find. They're telling me I get many students who tell me they're accusing me of not going to school, and I don't have my school records. And I've told them it's best to withdraw your admission. I'll work on finding your school records. I will work with your school and will reapply for your student visa, for example. I would prefer for my client to go back home and for me to apply for their student visa again, as an example, instead of them having a deportation order. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have. I know my client doesn't want to go back home. They want to go back to school. They want to go back to work. They want to go on their vacation. But I would much rather not have the deportation order because that's just not a good option. And I really don't want them to not be able to ever go back home by seeking asylum.
There you go. Thank you so much, Isa. I mean, those were really helpful. And yes, I'm sure it is the same for folks out there. So I would say please do not forget to like, share, and also subscribe to our channel. Our handle is at Immigration Talk Show. So check us out, subscribe to us, and hit that bell icon. And it's been great so far with Isa. So, Isa, are you ready for more questions?
Always.
All right, so let's take this one. This is from our Facebook group, I guess. And yes, this is from Priyanka. Being an Indian citizen, if a person got stamped her first H1B visa in a country other than India, will she be eligible for Dropbox in India, provided she has visa expired in the last 12 months?
Yes, that is part of the waiver, this the instructions that they're providing. Each embassy is not, it's providing their instructions online, but all the waiver instructions should be there. And yes, if it's less than the 12 months, you should be able to do it in the Dropbox. So yeah, take advantage of it. I am encouraging all my clients to do the waiver. I mean, before I would always tell them to do it 48, but now 12 months, do it now. Now, and that goes back to the prior question as to what we can expect. There's going to be delays. So don't wait. Do it now. You're a month 10. You think you have time. Do it now. But yes, you should be able to do it in India under the Dropbox. Not an issue.
Okay.
Check the
Kudos,
instructions,
Priyanka.
though. Check the embassy instructions online.
Right, right. Thank you, Isa, for taking that up, and all the best, Priyanka. Now, this next one is from an anonymous participant. This question was also put up 5 hours back. I work as a remote full time in a company as architect, and I'm planning for stamping next week where I have to go through interview. My company said I don't need client letters since I'm full time working as a consultant, and they gave a letter with all my details for counselor appointment. But I work as a consultant for client where they have SOW with us, so I help them customize the product. In this case, do I need a client letter, or since I'm a full time in my company, is the company's recommendation letter enough?
The company's recommendation letter is enough because you're a full-time employee of your company. However, the client recommendation, the client letter would be excellent if you can get it. However, I know that it's not that easy to sometimes go to our boss or to the client. If you can get it, excellent. It would be an amazing benefit to have. However, the company's recommendation letter should be enough. You're a full-time employee. That's all that is required. The client letter would be like the icing on the cake to make sure that the officer fully understands what you do. Because as you said, you are the consultant for the client, but you're technically working for the company. If we just help put the full picture of what you do, help answer all their questions. So I understand why you want it. I would want it too. But I also understand that sometimes it's difficult to get clients to give us what we want. So know that what you have is enough. If you can get more, that will be better.
Okay. Thank you, Isa. And now let's go on to our next one. This is from Mushhak Musthak. I'm planning to go to India for visa stamping for first time since I moved to US. In the sorry, is this the right time? Am I
No.
eligible for interview? No. Okay. All right. Should I go on then or
Yes, yes, yes. Go. I'll answer everything. I'm sorry.
no, it's cool. Am I eligible for interviews? So my question is, my company says They will give all supporting documents for the interview, but they said I don't need client letter because we have SOW with client and I work in remote and not in client location. Does it seem justifiable for a counselor? Is there any case like me?
I have many cases like yours. And what I've been telling my client is, why do we need to go? Like, why do we need the stamp? Is it something that you really need to go home? Is it somebody elderly that you need to visit? Are you feeling really homesick? Why do we need to leave? Because the reality is, to answer your first question, as you heard me abruptly say, no, right now it's not the best time. It's just the embassy right now, and it's not just, it's everywhere. Embassies are being, they're not the most welcoming environment at this point. So if you can avoid it, if it's not really necessary, but I understand there's some things that may be out of our hands. There may be some family responsibilities that we need. So if you to answer the second part of your question, if you have to, it seems to me the documents you have, it seems related to the prior question, there may be sufficient, but the more you have, the better. The bigger picture, the full picture that we can show of what we do, that's best. Sometimes it's difficult to get documents from clients. I understand, because of course the H1B may be your visa, but I have to work as your attorney directly with your employer to get records. And I understand how difficult it may be for employer to get records from clients, how uncomfortable it is to sometimes ask letter from clients. So the more you can get, the better it is. But it seems to me, to answer your question, that what you have is enough for the interview. Make sure you understand it, make sure you're comfortable with it. Once again, if you have to, because if you don't have to, if you're okay here and you don't have to travel, now it's not the best time to travel if you don't have to. If your time is up and you have to, it's okay. But if not, stay here. We're good here. Spring break, enjoy the time. I'll take another question. H1B. Okay, so H1B stamping in May. It's 160. Oh, submitted within 30 days to that appointment. How do I get? It's not able to retrieve since I didn't submit it within 30 days. But same 160 attached to that appointment. How did I get rid of this to go for same appointment? Oh, I'm not understanding this. Okay, this is what I recommend. If you are using the wrong DS-160 and that's the concern, go to your appointment with what you have. I know how difficult it is to get appointment. I wouldn't want to reschedule. The reality is, there's not, rescheduling might be a lot more complicated. So I am failing to fully understand if the issue is that you have the wrong DS-160 and your concern is that you're processing the wrong DS-160 application. Take with you the correct application and explain it to the officer. Because once again, I understand how difficult it is to get these correct, to get an appointment. It may take a long time. Take the correct application with you, because it may be difficult, if not impossible, to change it. Also, I understand there's an online system. I'm sure you've already emailed them and contacted them a million times to correct this. Keep doing so up until the day of your interview, but make sure you have the correct information and the correct form with you when you go to your interview.
Thank you so much, Isa, for taking that up as well. I was facing it.
It
I'm glad
happens.
to be
Don't
back.
worry.
So
I just hope I
thank you
answered
for
it
taking that
correctly,
up.
because it seems like if he has the wrong application, but I think if you take the correct one, you should be okay, especially if it's just for stamping. If this is your first time, they'll keep your passport.
All right. Thank you, Isa. Thank you for being so awesome too. So patiently taking up all our questions. So next one is also from an anonymous participant asking, I started filing out my DS-160 a few days ago and have already booked a Dropbox appointment for my H1B stamping. I had a quick question. Does a DS-160 application expire if it remains unsubmitted for too long? I'm holding off on submitting mine because I'm waiting for my updated I-797 and I wanted to ensure that my DS-160 reflects the correct details.
So yes, it may expire, but at the same time, you're doing the right thing because you do want the DS-160 to be as fully complete and as accurate as possible. You don't want it to be wrong or to have any mistakes or to have any issues like the prior question where you have the wrong application, the wrong information. They may hold on to, especially now with embassies being so picky, they will may hold on to something minor just to either delay your processing or to even deny. So it's annoying, but it's best to hold off to make sure the application is correct. Worst that could happen is that when you go back to try to submit it, it may tell you it's expired and you may have to do it again. And I know that's annoying. I know I'm minimizing it here, being like, oh, you have to do it again. But it would be best to make sure the application is as accurate as it possibly can be. Also, I know you guys know this because you watch this, but make sure you print it, have it with you, bring it with you. So I know it says don't bring it to the appointment, to review it because that's what it will that's what they will ask you. That's what they will go through during the 10 minutes you'll be there. And that's what they will use for all others. So make sure you're always consistent every time you renew it, because we just talked about how waiver time got shorter. So you want to make sure you're always consistent. So every time, every waiver, you never have any issue and the process is always easy breezy every single time.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Isa, for taking that up. And I think we will move on to our next question now, or have we covered? I think we have covered most of our viewer questions. But,
Good.
we were also talking about legal options, if an H1B visa gets detained or denied. So, what are the legal options? And we've already discussed this. So, what are some key H1B visa holders they should know before they're traveling internationally to avoid these issues when they return?
So the main thing when traveling, like we already mentioned, like checking before, checking your time you've been here, checking how much time you have left. That's the main issue I see with H1 that maybe that 6, 7 years like you're already up and you didn't realize it. So check how much time you have left, check how much time you've been here. Be so that way the questions they'll ask you at the entry you can feel comfortable answering the questions about your employer. Where is it located? It may seem, especially now with remote work and CBP officers can be really sneaky and they will
Yes.
ask you, so where's your office? And you're like, I don't know, it's over here. And that's where they tend to question whether you're really working and really doing the H1B. And you may say, but I work remote and I only go to the office once. So it's, keep that in mind and bring evidence with you. It's a brand new office, a brand new place. Here's my card. Here's my boss's information. That's to check. Now, here in the US, like I said, if you have that encounter, it's good for your employer to know not only your rights, but the rights of your employees, your coworkers. What we notice with ICE is because of the desire to meet the numbers and the quotas that President Trump has promoted and has promised to the U.S., there may be not really ICE raids; it's more like ICE encounters, we may call it. And know that here in the U.S., like I said, you have greater rights. So if your encounter with ICE is at your place of employment, they need to have signed warrants by actual judges. So it's good for your employer to know that if they're coming and saying, "Oh, we need to check the H1Bs in this area," it's different from the Department of Labor going to see if employees here are rightly are actual employees than to actually start arresting people. There are certain requirements. So it's good for your employer to know. And if you're for any reason detained or stopped or have any immigration encounter in the US, that's actually the place where you can fight the revocation of your visa. If your visa is revoked because they don't think your employer is real, you can fight that here before an immigration judge. If they're fighting because they don't think you work, you can fight that here before an immigration judge. You have that remedy here, but that's only if you're already, meaning you're not seeking, the legal term is not seeking admission. It's at the
Mhm.
airport where the remedies that you may have are very limited. So it's good, as we've been suggesting, to plan ahead to make sure that you have evidence of always being here legally, evidence of where you work, evidence of the time that you've been here, of what you're going to do, or of where your work is located. Minor details that we normally don't think about. And now might be a good time to keep in mind just in case.
Thank you so much, Isa. Thank you, really. It's been such a great discussion. I don't want this to end, But we've already covered an hour, so I might have to let you go for now. But if you still have a couple more minutes, I would still have more questions. What do you say?
I will take the minutes. I'll gladly answer any questions.
All right. So this next one is actually a case study where, I was reading more about it. So there was a software engineer working in Silicon Valley and went to India for a work trip. But when he came back, CBP detained him over an old traffic related misdemeanor. So his visa was revoked and he was placed in expedited removal. So how could he challenge this, and what options does he have to fix his status?
And that's where I mentioned the importance of checking your visa status before. And that's where you can check your email. The DS-160 that we've been mentioning continuously, we put our email address there where they would communicate if our status, if our visa has been revoked for any reason. This individual maybe used their email address from 1998, and that's where they emailed us. Although the Department of State sometimes is notorious for not even emailing us or simply thinking that we're going to know our visas revoked by magic. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he didn't get the email and that's why he didn't know. But if you have your DS-160, make sure you check the email address that you used in that form. So that's where you would know what's the status of your visa, number one. Number two, for him, it would be relevant to understand that anyone who is in the US for less than 2 years could be subject to, as Nipa mentioned, expedited removal. So if you are seeking admission, if you're coming into the US, you obviously been in the US less than 2 years, you just got here. So they can kick you out right away. So in that particular case, if he would had emphasized, as we had a prior, somebody else previously asked, they had been working on an H1B for 3 years, it would have been helpful for him to argue, oh, I've been working on this visa for a certain amount of time. This was a very brief trip that I took. There are many circumstances that may have helped him fight his case at the airport. But remember that we have discussed that at the airport, your options are very limited. You can withdraw your admission and that way avoid the expedited removal, because expedited removal is a deportation. That's the deportation that I was mentioning that bars you from the US for 5 years from the airport. Or you can seek asylum, which will keep you in jail until you can prove that you can't go back to your country due to persecution from the government or an agent the government can't control. So in his case, it would have been best to, if it is a traffic charge, once again, sadly, the US can revoke your visa for any reason. And a traffic misdemeanor can include driving without a license, it can include a DUI, and these reasons are very difficult to fight. So while we can later on argue if they were to revoke your visa because they argue your employer is not real, you can apply and prove that your employer is real. Or if they revoke your visa because they argue you're not working, and you can apply later on saying you are working indeed. When it's something criminal like a traffic misdemeanor, because it is a decision from the Department of State, it is very difficult to have that visa reinstated later on, and even more difficult if you already have an expedited removal order because of the 5-year bar that I mentioned. So for him, he would have to either fight the traffic charge, either argue that it's not him, or it will have to be that it's not him, because if it is him, there's nothing he can do. He would have to wait the 5 years, and after 5 years, try to reapply for the visa. If he has any family in the US, it would have to be a qualifying relative, a spouse or a child, or maybe a parent. He can ask for a waiver. Sorry, long answer for a sad response.
No, but I mean, totally makes sense, and I think you'll just have to play safe with all your time out there under a visa. So, I mean, try not to fall into, even though they may look small to you, but it's not really small. It could be getting more
Yes.
complicated a little later. So, thank you so much, Isa, for taking that up. You wanted to add something?
Well, the main point I wanted to add is that right now, sadly, visas can be revoked being only on based on the accusation. That's why the Lake and Riley Act is so controversial, because it is allowing people to be placed on removal proceedings, which was what we call deportation proceedings, and technically to be detained only by being accused. So that would also mean that even if, and that's also why I keep emphasizing to check your visa before coming,
Mhm.
because you may have this traffic infraction that you think you paid and it's old, and because it spent so long that you didn't pay it, or I don't know, nothing happened with it, now it turns into a misdemeanor, and it just gives the government the authority to revoke it. So just check ahead of time, play it safe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Isa, for taking that up. And maybe before we leave, if you could, tell what should employers be doing to make sure their H1B workers don't run into legal trouble, especially with all the policy changes that are happening so fast and every day.
First, I'm going to answer the whether traffic infractions affect the B1, B2 visa applicants as well. It affects everyone. Traffic infractions, they sound silly, and I never thought before, during the Obama administration, for example, I've been practicing for a while, I'm rather old, I would tell no effect. But I noticed, maybe because I live in Miami where people drive very well, they accumulate and they do have an effect. And they, because visas are issued, particularly B1, B2, which are tourist visas, are issued at the discretion of the consular officer. An officer might, at their discretion, and the Department of State, the Attorney General, who are the ones that monitor these visas, may, are at their discretion, determine that you have way too many traffic tickets, and they can withdraw, they can revoke your visa. So be careful. Don't drive like me. They may have an effect. These regulations, the decisions to revoke a visa, are fully discretionary. So because of that, there may not be written black and white in our laws and regulations. So keep that in mind. So yes, traffic infractions could affect even a B1, B2 tourist visa. As to employers, what we can do to protect our employees, I'll tell you my latest case. My employer, I don't know why, I don't know what they were thinking. They were a little bit too laid back with my employee and decided to, I guess, make them partner. I don't know, give them an interest in the company, which is great. But when you make somebody partner, when you include them in the company, you must continue payroll. H1B, one of the main requirements is continue payroll. So make sure your employers keep paying you. And by paying you, I mean that you remain a W-2 employee. Because you are now a partner, or because you are now an essential employee, because there maybe later on will petition for your green card or whatever, you're growing in the company, the tech startup is now a tech big boy, whatever, you're growing, great. It doesn't mean that now because you have the credit card on the company and you're taking the money directly from the bank account, that may happen, that's okay. But you must remember, you must remain a W-2 employee, you must remain in payroll. I've noticed many employers that as they grow, they feel comfortable with the employees, they give them more responsibilities, and by giving them access to the company, they I guess relax with the payroll and HR requirements. I don't know what's going on, but it has led to a lot of questions when now the waiver and the renewals. I also noticed, I think this had to do with, because of the waivers, people were a little bit more relaxed when it came to reapplying. And now that the waiver is the less time, I am preparing more applications, and I've noticed these mistakes from employers. And I am very worried about whether these visas will be renewed and many issues that may come up. So make sure your employers keep paying you W-2 always. Also, for ICE raids, which have been, I live in Miami, Florida. I practice all over the world, but I live in Miami, Florida. And here in Miami, Florida, there have been ICE raids. None of the ICE raids have occurred fully under the law, meaning that the warrants that the officers have used, none of them have been signed by actual judges. They have been administrative warrants. And so I mention this to all of you because it was not until after that employers realized, wait a minute, an administrative warrant, meaning a warrant that is signed by another officer. If I, as your friend, sign a warrant, has no effect. I don't have to let you in. So keep that in mind. It's something minor, but it's huge, because if I am working and I don't know if maybe your visa was revoked because you had a DUI yesterday and maybe you are now here illegally, I don't know. And somebody shows up saying they want to uh, have a raid at my job, it's good for me to know, is this signed by a judge? I don't know this person. Maybe call an attorney, and I'm not going to let you in into my place of business because I don't know this warrant. And that way protect the person who maybe was accused of a crime and doesn't even know it, from detention. So let your boss know that just in case. They should know. I don't know how comfortable you may feel with your boss having this conversation, but if you know it, and if you are the boss, you can also let them know, hey, no, my boss has instructed me not to let you in because this is not signed by a judge. So those are the two main things I've been telling all my employers: pay your employees by W-2, and check that all warrants are signed by judges before you let anyone into your premises.
Absolutely. Play safe, but also play smart. So know everything well, do your research properly, and I'm sure of that nothing is going to scare you when that happens. Knowledge is
True.
power, at least in this matter. So do that. And thank you so much, Isa, for spending this time with us, full of energy, and for patiently answering and taking up all of our questions from our viewers, not just on YouTube, but also from those who are watching on Twitter as well, and also from our Facebook groups. It was really lovely having you, and I wish this wouldn't end so soon, but yes, we'll have to at this point. Yes, so I'm really hoping already to see you again soon. Please tell me
Whenever
about
you
your
want.
yeah. Yeah, but before we go, do you have any end notes, anything more you want to add, and we can.
I know things are scary right now. Every day we wake up and we have different news and different memorandum and something different going on. But don't get overwhelmed. Just stay informed. I know that sometimes that might be overwhelming too, but it's good to stay informed and know that you guys are doing everything right. You're staying informed. You have your visas. You're applying correctly. As long as you keep doing everything right, you'll have the law on your side. And if I can help you in any way, I'm always here.
Thank you so much. And yes, you can contact Attorney Isa, and that you can do so by calling her on her number, and also by emailing her. You can call her on 305-938-0676, and you can email Attorney Isadora at isadora@isalawyers.com. Check out the spelling, it's there on the screen, and go visit www.isalawyers.com. Thank you, Isa, once again. It was lovely having you, and you have a great day ahead.
You too. Thank you guys.
Thank you. And folks, you can also email me or call me or WhatsApp me on my number. My number is 408-335-6444, and my email address is nipa@staffingly.com. And once again, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and also hit that bell icon so that whenever we have discussions like these, you are notified. And absolutely, it was so amazing having you, Isadora. I'm already looking forward to having you back again. So, yes, and friends, also follow us, not just on YouTube, but we are also there on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram. So, check us out, follow us, and connect with us. So, bye, y'all. Have a wonderful day ahead and watch out our space. Stay tuned on Immigration Talk Show.